All right, we are live on YouTube and let's make sure we're live on Instagram too. All right, we are live. Welcome, my friends. Happy Friday. Hope you all are doing well. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that comes up a lot for our audience in terms of, um, blood sugar spikes, blood sugar crashes, ultimately what that looks like, key signs that that's happening, as well as why it's happening in the first place. Because we find for many of our clients too, we approach crashes and spikes in a very reactive way, very stressful way where, hey, if we're spiking up, we go for a walk, or if we're crashing, we eat something. It's like that all day long to the point where we're having to control every single facet of our life, every single facet of our food. We don't go out to eat because we can't control it. We don't exercise because we feel poorly afterwards. When we're stressed, we crash, so we avoid those. So it really becomes this really restrictive sort of lifestyle to the point where we're having to cut back more and more and more things and feel less and less functional. Um, and so it can be a very debilitating thing if we let it and if we approach it in maybe a way that isn't as supportive to really addressing some of those root causes, right? So when we look at spikes and crashes, like I mean, even in the name, we just don't have the stability, right? We're spiking up, we're crashing down. We're spiking up, we're crashing down. We just naturally do not have the stability that we need to have, stable blood sugar, stable energy, and avoid symptoms, right? And so we ride this roller coaster for most of the day. And so because of that, ultimately we obviously don't feel good and there can be a variety of symptoms that come up. But the best way that I know how to explain this is with like a campfire. And so I don't know if you guys have been camping before, but my family and I, we used to go camping all the time during the summertime, even like before Labor Day. So this week it was like a last like family trip before school started. Um, and we would go camping nearby, and we always make a campfire in the evenings. Typically, like cook meals and things. And the way that we get it started is with like twigs and newspaper and maybe a little bit of gas or maybe a lighter or any sort of dry kindling that we had available to really get that going. And then eventually we'd put like logs in that fire to really make that sustain. But essentially, someone with like crashing and spiking blood sugar, they have that kindling type of fire, right? Something that really shoots up. Because when you pour gas on a fire, it really shoots up. Or when you put newspaper or paper plates or anything that's really flammable, that shoots up very fast. And as fast as it shoots up, it also fizzles out as quickly, especially if we're not feeding anything into that. And that's essentially with what someone is experiencing with spikes and crashes. They constantly have to stoke that fire in a sense of adding something in, and in order to avoid feeling poorly, right? Feeling terribly. And that's what you'll see a lot of these clients doing is they have to eat very frequently. They have to eat like every hour, 2 hours, 3 hours in order to avoid those symptoms, right? And so obviously that becomes very exhausting very quickly because you're constantly having to stoke that fire. You're having to plan, you're having to stick to a strict meal schedule in order to make sure that you're getting what you need day in and day out to avoid those symptoms. Well, for many people, that's a set of diminishing returns because as much as strict as you are, you still get those reactions. You still get those crashes throughout the day, right? And so then it becomes a question of okay, what is causing this, right? And what does that actually look like? Because for some people, they're experiencing this, but they actually can't name it because there's little validation, right? They might not show up on like a blood sugar monitor. It might, but it might not. It might not show up on a fasting glucose test. It may or may not show up on an A1C test. And especially if it doesn't show up, you don't have the validation outside of your symptoms, right? And that's where it becomes tricky. And so for many people, what we see with spikes and crashes is they will wake up during the middle of the night, so like around like 3 a.m., almost like clockwork, where maybe they have to wake up to use the bathroom. Maybe they just wake up and fall back to sleep. Maybe it's hard to go back to sleep. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they have symptoms, right? At this time where they're needing to eat in order to prevent those, right? So that could come up. And those symptoms could be them feeling shaky, dizzy, lightheaded, even night sweats or heart palpitations where your heart is really racing on you, right, in the middle of the night. So we find that. We also find a lot of clients that have like really severe mood swings to the point where they're like, they find themselves snapping at their family a lot, their kids, their partner, etc. When they know that naturally they're not like that, right? So we have clients that have, some of those. We have some clients that feel really exhausted and tired after meals. So every time they eat, especially when it's with carbohydrates, they feel more exhausted, right? They feel more sleepy, lethargic. For those that might be struggling with weight loss or have had a goal of weight loss, they maybe have not been able to lose weight for over a longer period of time despite trying, right? So that comes up. We also have clients where even the smallest things really take a large amount of effort, right? And so maybe small things around the house, for example, they take a lot more energy than what they feel it should, right? So even little things. We see this in the case of like stressors where sometimes just everyday stressors put a major demand on that person to the point where it's like, wow, it doesn't feel like a lot, but it feels very demanding of me. We see that with exercise as well, where someone will do something more intense and it will really affect them, not just immediately in the moment, but in the days afterwards as well. So we see that quite a bit. We also see that the A1C that I just talked about, where that marker may be high, but it might not. And if it's not, we don't have, of course, the validation that we have more of the blood sugar concerns until maybe we get a CGM or we check our blood sugar. Or, for those that, for many people, even if they do check those, it still looks normal, right? So there's a lot of things floating around, but those are the six sneaky signs that you have are dealing with those spikes and crashes. And, despite them maybe not always be associated with a number, it doesn't mean that they're not significant. It doesn't mean that they're not really impacting your life, because we've had clients that have had this for a year, 2 years, 10, 30 years, that it's really impacting them. And it's really impacting their quality of life, their ability to feel functional, their ability to work, their ability to exercise, just do normal, fun things. That they feel almost at this point incapable of doing because of where their body is at, right? So the question is, how do we create stability, right? Well, for many people, how they try to create stability is they try to cut out carbs, right? And for some people, that can have a slight improvement, but over time, for many people, it starts to catch up with them, either from a mental perspective, where they're cutting out all their favorite foods and all the foods that they've known and loved and done well with their entire lives, and now they can't have them. But even more importantly, too, what we found is it actually worsens their ability to feel energized. Can lead to more hormonal issues. It can lead to even worse sleep, even worse stress response, right? So they might develop even more symptoms after doing one of those. We also see clients where they might try to solve it with supplementation, where they're taking cabinets fulls of supplements to try to solve it. But in reality, this is not like a supplemental problem. It's not a deficiency in supplements, right? And I get that it's a lower hanging fruit. It's something that can feel easy, but for so many people, they've already been down that road, and it hasn't quite led to the result that they're wanting because it's not quite hitting on the root cause, right? And then we have some clients that maybe their doctor has suggested, hey, you should get on metformin or you should get on Ozempic or some type of medication to help with that insulin sensitivity, so you're not spiking and you're not crashing, right? Well, then what we're also saying is like the problem is you have a deficiency in metformin, you have a deficiency in Ozempic, right? And I'm not saying that there's not a time and place for some of those things, but if that's the lowest hanging fruit, we're probably working on the wrong thing, right? And even after we see some clients, previously to working with us that have implemented this, they still are finding that they're having trouble creating stability. So it's not about cutting out carbs. It's not about going on a ton of supplements. It's not about jumping on a medication. It's about looking at the things in your life that are creating that instability, right? And I think this is an overlooked thing no matter how advanced that you are, because we see this in clients that are some of the most intelligent people that you'll run across. They almost have a PhD in nutrition, even though they might have not have the licensure to show for that. They've studied so much and they're so advanced around it, but they have yet to master the ability to do that for themselves, take the information that they know and apply that in such a way where it works for them. Right. And what is really missing, what we find from these clients is they're not quite meeting their needs in a way that they need to, right? And needs can mean a lot of different things. It can mean nutrition, it can mean exercise, it can mean sunlight, it can mean fun, it can mean downtime, whatever it is. And it can be a combination of all those things for most people that we find. We're not quite meeting our body's needs in a way that is really truly supportive for us, because we can be eating healthy on paper, eating balanced meals, but ultimately, if we're still having spikes and crashes after our meals, it's probably not supporting us. It's probably not the balanced meals that we need. It needs to be balanced in a more effective way, right? When it comes to our routines and lifestyle, we might be staying active, we might be managing our stress, but is it leading to the stabilization in blood sugar that we need? If it's not, then there's probably something missing there, right? So it's not about and the efforts, all of those are valid, and all of those should be greatly appreciated and acknowledged and credited, because it's hard to kind of navigate this on your own. And you're implementing things, you're not seeing the result. Like that is really disheartening and disappointing. But the key thing here is, acknowledging that, acknowledging the effort, but also saying, how can we get more of the result that we want? And ultimately, that comes from having some awareness to say, hey, how can I start meeting my needs a little bit more effectively here? It's not about doing more things. Many people think it's that. It's about doing more things in a way that works for you. That's the difference, right? Doesn't matter what's healthy on paper. What matters is what's healthy based on how your body's responding, right? Sometimes that takes a coach. Sometimes that takes someone just having that awareness and tracking patterns and see what connections that they can make. But we find for many clients who are really struggling with it, if they can get someone to support them with that, it becomes a lot easier to pinpoint. Okay, these are the reasons why I'm not seeing the stabilization with my blood sugar or the elimination of those symptoms that I'm truly wanting, right? Because when we can do that, well, all of a sudden we sleep through the night, right? Without waking, without symptoms, feeling refreshed in the morning, feeling energized after meals, losing weight without counting calories or tracking macros or any of that, right? We're able to eat carbs and eat the carbs that we previously reacted to without any issue. We're not constantly trying to react throughout the day to prevent crashes and spikes. We're not even worried about it. It's not even on our radar. We just eat and we tolerate it well, right? That's what we can get when we stabilize our blood sugar. And many people try to, micromanage things. And I think, and I'll wrap up with this. The approach that you take with this is just as important as the result that you want to get. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is when we're approaching something with a lot of frantic, stressful energy, and we're doing things out of fear, and we're reacting all throughout the day to prevent something from happening, that is quite stressful on your body, right? It's quite stressful, whether you realize it or not. And of course, we're only doing that to try to control the situation, control the blood sugar, right? But for many people, that's adding more and more stress to their plate versus when you can find the foundational things that truly support stable blood sugar, regardless of what's going on, regardless of if you have a stressful day, regardless of if you're eating carbs, regardless of if you're exercising or traveling or have a holiday, right? Around people, whatever. When you have those foundations in place, it won't matter. You'll always have stable blood sugar. So that's the key. And that's something that we work on with clients, and it's amazing what can happen when they find those fundamentals for them. Because we were just talking with one of our clients that had like a one-off session with us, and after 2 weeks, she was able to travel and is not seeing any crashes, no hypoglycemia, and she hadn't been able to do that for 3 years. 3 years she hadn't been able to travel. She hadn't been able to have like really enjoy her life. She's a young person in her 20s and is finally able to have more flexibility. Is finally able to for meals to last her longer than 2 hours, right? And that's the really cool thing, because it's not just about the blood sugar symptoms. It's about what this allows you to do with your life that just opens things up. And that's what we, really happy that clients can see. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you some perspective on the post for today. If you haven't checked it out, feel free. It's the um, caption, white caption post from today. We do have 2 more coaching slots available, one-on-one coaching for the rest of the month. If this was helpful for you guys to see, and if you're working on similar challenges, feel free to reach out. We'd love to support you. All right. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and we will talk next week.